Good day, Engineer Nathaniel Deju. I am Jade Mindaniausa, and I am here to discuss about the Republic Act number 4274, also known as the Mining Engineering Law of the Philippines, approved by June 19, 1965. And enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the Philippines and Congress assembled. For the Article 1 and Section 1 is all about the title of Act. This Act should be known as the Mining Engineering Law of the Philippines. Section 2 is all about the creation and compositions of the board, that within 30 days after the approval of this Act, there should be created a board of examiners for mining engineers to be composed of 3 registered mining engineers, all to be appointed by the President of the Philippines. Section 3 is all about the powers vested in the board. The Board of Examiners for Mining Engineers is vested with authority conferably with the provisions of this Act to administer oaths, to issue, suspend, and or revoke certificates of registration for the practice of mining engineering, to investigate violations of this Act, and for this purpose it may under the hand of its chairman and seal of the board issue subpoena for attendance of witnesses and subpoena duces tecum for production of documents and to discharge such other duties as the board may deem necessary for the maintenance of efficient, ethical, and technical standards of the mining engineering profession. The board should exercise the powers conferred upon it by this Act, should from time to time look into the conditions affecting the practice of mining engineering in the Philippines, and whenever necessary recommend to the President of the Philippines the adoption of such measures as may be deemed proper for the rigorous enforcement of this Act. Section 4 is all about the qualifications of board members. The members of the board should at the time of appointment 1. Be a citizen of the Philippines. 2. Be a holder of the degree of Engineer of Mines or EM or Bachelor of Science in Mining Engineering, acronym is BSEM, conferred by an engineering school or college, legally chartered and of good standing. 3. Be registered and legally qualified to practice mining engineering in the Philippines. 4. Has been engaged in the actual practice of mining engineering, metallurgical engineering, and or geology for the at least 10 years. 5. Or which must be in the field of mining engineering. 5. Not to be member of the faculty of any school, college, or university where a regular course in mining engineering, geology, and or metallurgy is taught, nor have pecuniary interest in such institution. Lastly, recommended by the corresponding bona fide professional mining engineering society. Section 5 is all about the terms of office. The members of the board should hold office for a term of 3 years after their appointment or until their successors should have been appointed and duly qualified. The members of the first board appointed under this Act should hold office for the following terms: 1 member for 1 year who should be the chairman, 1 member for 2 years, and 1 member for 3 years. The succeeding chairman should be the member with the shortest unexpired term. Vacancy should be filled for the unexpired term only. Each member of the board should qualify by taking the proper oath of office prior to entering upon the performance of his duties. Section 6 is all about the executive officer and the secretary of the board, and Section 7 is all about the removal of the board members. The president, through his executive secretary, may remove any member of the board for neglect of duty or incompetency or for unprofessional or dishonorable and unethical conduct after having given the member concerned an opportunity to defend himself in a proper administrative investigation to be conducted by the Office of the Civil Service Commissioner. Section 8 is all about the compensation of the board. The members of the board should each receive as compensation the minimum sum of 10 pesos for each applicant examined or registered without examination as mining engineer. A member of the board who is at the same time a government employee should receive the compensation provided herein in addition to his salary. All fees should be received by the Civil Service Commission, which should pay all authorized compensation and expenditure by the board. And Section 9 is all about the rules and regulation, and the board may subject to the approval of the President of the Philippines adopt such rules and regulations as may be necessary to carry out the provisions of this act. And lastly, for the Article 1 is Section 10 is all about the submission of annual report. The board should submit an annual report to the President of the Philippines through his executive secretary after the close of each fiscal year, giving a detailed account of its proceedings during the year and making such recommendations as may be deemed proper. For the Article 2 is all about the registration and examinations. For the Section 11, it is all about the inhibition from practicing mining engineering. That for me, no one can be practicing in mining engineering in the Philippines without having been previously registered as a mining engineer under the provisions of this Act or granted a certificate of exemption under Section 13 of this Act. And Section 12 is all about the definition of terms. A person should be deemed to be practicing mining engineering or rendering mining engineering service within the meaning and intent of this Act, whose sole or fee, salary, or other reward of compensation paid to him or through another person, or even without such compensation rendered or offered to render by means of signs, cards, advertisements, written reports, and or in any other manner offered to practice mining engineering in the form of consultation, investigation, mining reports, valuation, and or reserve calculation, take charge of direct and supervise in the underground or surface mining, open cuts, pits, or quarries, or shaft sinking, tunneling, stooping, dredging, hydrolecking, and silicing for minerals and or mineral products that can be provided in the above functions that are exercised in a responsible way and independent capacity. And Section 13 is all about the exemption from registration that can be not required of the following persons. First, practitioners, and lastly, foreigners. And there are conditions with that registration subject in the practice. So first, that the applicant curriculum vitae should be submitted before arrival in the country. Two, that the applicant will not engage in private practice on his own account. Third, that for every applicant on one Filipino understudy who is registered under the provision of this act that can be should be employed by the private firm utilizing the services of such applicant for at least the duration of the alien expert's tenure with said firm. And lastly, it can be the exemption should be good only for 6 months, for renewable for another 6 months at the discretion of the board, that can be provided that in case the applicant ceases to be employed in the categories provided in paragraphs A and B hereof and engages in occupation requiring registration as mining engineer, such person must be registered under the provision of this act that can be allowed maximum 3 consultants at any one time. And lastly, for the not be required of the following persons is the practitioners that can be registered mining engineers or certified as mine, mill, or quarrying foreman under Act Number 2000 that 985 as amended and under the rules and regulations promulgated thereunder in the ipso facto that can be recognized registered under this act that can be it can be allowed to retain their certificates issued by the former board examiners. And section 14, it is all about the examination required that can be practice of mining engineering that can be required to undergo written examinations as provided in this act. And section 15, the qualification for examinations in order to be admitted to the mining engineering examinations, an applicant should establish to the satisfactor or satisfaction of the board that can be at least 1 year of age provided that an applicant possessing all three qualification contained in this section who is under 21 years of age that can be allowed to take the examinations on condition that he should not be granted certificate until after he attains the 21 of age. And two, if a foreigner his country accords reciprocity with the Philippines. And third, he is of good reputation and moral character. And lastly, he has graduated with at least a Bachelor of Science degree in mining engineering from a duly recognized school, college, or university, or Bachelor of Science in Engineering course, or in geology, plus at least 5 years of practical mining experience subject to evaluation in the board of provided that can be other engineering professions should give the same privilege to graduates in mining engineering. And for the section 16 is qualification of applicants for mine and or quarry foreman that can be applying for certificate of registration as mine and or quarry foreman that can be prior to his admission rather for certification to establish the satisfaction of the board that he is at least 21 years of age. If a foreigner his country accords reciprocity with the Philippines, he is a good reputation and moral character, and he has completed a mining and a quarry course of instruction from a vocational or trade school or correspondence school of known standing or from any mining company training course or its equivalent or rather equivalent, or lastly he was the at least 5 years actual experience in mining or in acquiring. And section 17, it is a date and scope examination. Examinations for the practice of mining engineering should be given on the second Monday of January, July of each year. Examinations should cover questions relating to mining engineering and economics, mining laws and ethics, metallurgy, or dressing and assaying, geology and surveying, and applied mathematics, provided that the relative weights of mining engineering and economic mining laws and ethics should be 40%, that of geology and surveying 20%, and metallurgy 20%, and that of applied mathematics 20%. And for the section 18 is all about the report of examination results that can be the board of examiners rather for the mining engineers should within 90 days after the examination report the ratings obtained by each candidate of the Commissioner of Civil Service. And section 19, it is issuance of certificates, that it is an amendatory act that receive applications for certificate of registration without examination as mining engineer and may issue to any applicant who on the date of or approval rather of this act that can be a Filipino citizen or alien who country of which he is a citizen accords reciprocity with the Republic of the Philippines. It is a good moral character. And lastly, he or she graduated in the degree of Bachelor of Science in Mining Engineering or or BSEM or EM, that any school or university that can be graduated in mining engineering. And section 20 is all about the contents of certificate of registration. All certificates of registration should state the full name of the registrant, should have a serial number, and should be signed by all members of the board and the Commissioner of Civil Service as executive officer of the board, and should be attested by the official seal. And section 21 is all about the fees for examinations and registration. And every applicant of examination as mining engineer should pay minimum 50 pesos, provided that, however, the applicant of registration as mining engineer without examination should pay a minimum fee of 100 pesos for mine or quarry foreman 20 pesos rather. And section 22 is reprimand, suspension, and revocation of certificates. And lastly, for the section 23 in the article 2 is the reissue of revoked certificates and replacement of lost certificate. That's all. Thank you for the article 2. For the article 3 is all about the sundry provisions relative to the practice of mining engineering. Section 24 is all about the prohibitions in the practice of mining engineering, the penal provisions that any person who shall practice mining engineering in the Philippines as defined in this act without a certificate of registration in accordance with the provisions of this act, unless declared exempt from registration, or any person presenting or using as his own the certificate of registration of another, or any person who should give any false or forged evidence, or any person who should impersonate any registrant of like or different name, or any person who should use a revoked or suspended certificate of registration, or any person who should assume, use, or advertise any title or description tending to convey the impression that he is a mining engineer without having graduated as such, or is engaged in the mining engineering practice without holding a valid certificate of registration from the board, should upon conviction be sentenced to a fine of not less than 1,000 pesos nor more than 2,000 pesos, or to suffer imprisonment for a period of not less than 1 year nor more than 2 years, or both, in the discretion of the court. Section 25, it is all about the personnel required in mineral exploitation and or quarrying. Every mining works, projects, and or quarrying operation should have not less than the following complement of resident mining engineers and or foremen duly registered under this act. 1. 25 persons but not more than 50 persons for the entire operation directly engaged in mining and or quarrying operation. A registered foreman is required. 2. Over 50 persons but not more than 100 persons for the entire operations directly engaged in mining and or quarrying operation. 1 registered mining engineer and 1 registered foreman are required. 3. 25 persons but not more than 75 persons per shifts directly engaged in mining and or quarrying operation. 1 registered foreman per shift, and one registered mining engineer for the entire operation. And lastly, over 75 persons per shift directly engaged in mining or quarrying operation should inquire a registered foreman and the registered mining engineer for each shift, that provided that all persons acting as a mine superintendent or its equivalent in the mine engineer should be registered mining engineers. Section 26 is all about the posting of certificates. The owner, manager, or other person in charge of any mine or quarry operation of a firm, co-partnership, company, corporation, or joint stock association should post or cause to be posted in a conspicuous place within the premises of such mines the certificate of registration of mining engineers, mine and or quarry foreman employed therein. Section 27 is all about the roster of mining engineers, that a roster showing the names and places and or addresses of all registered mining engineers or persons holding certificates of registration for mine and or quarry foreman issued by the board should be prepared by the secretary of the board commencing 1 year from the date this act becomes effective, and should keep up to date this roster annually, and copies of this roster should be mailed to each person so registered upon request and placed on file with the office of the President of the Philippines, office of the Director of Mines, and with such other entities that may request this roster. And Section 28 is all about the exempt in the case of persons exempted under the provisions of this act. No foreign mining engineer should be granted any of the rights and privileges under Section 14 of this act, that unless that the country of which he is a subject permits Philippine mining engineers to practice within its territorial limits on the same basis as the subject or citizen of such country. And Section 29 is all about the enforcement of the act by officers of the law. It should be the duty of all duly constituted officers of the law that the national government or of any provincial, city, or municipal government to enforce the provisions of this act and to prosecute any person violating the same, the legal officer of the civil service commissions that should act as the legal advisor of the board and render such legal assistance as may be necessary and carrying out the provisions of this act. And lastly, for the Article 3, the Section 30, that is all about the act not affecting other professions, that this act should not be construed to affect or prevent the practice of other legally established professions in the Philippines. For the last article for this act is all about the final provisions. For the Section 31, based on my understanding that the 5,000 pesos is hereby appropriated annually disbursed by the Office of the President of the Philippines, that can be accordance with the provisions of this act, and to cover expenses incurred by the members of the board during field inspections and investigations, and all sums collected in accordance with the act should be paid to the National Treasury as part of the general funds thereof. It provides during the 12 months of the operation of this act, any portion of the sum collected may be used for the purposes of this act and to cover disbursements in excess of the amount appropriated herein. For the Section 32 is all about if any section or sections of this act should be declared unconstitutional or invalid, it should not invalidate the other sections hereof. And for the Section 33, all laws, parts of laws, orders, ordinances, or regulations, and conflict with the provisions of this act should be and hereby repealed. And last but not the least, for the Article 4, which is the final provisions, this act should take effect upon its approval that can be approved in June 1965.